somehow, no matter how technologically advanced we get or how much we know, there is still an incredible amount of preventable disease, exploitation, suffering. You know, the things like starving children and unnecessary war, genocide, sexual violence. You get it. And it's all preventable. Clearly, we need new solutions. As an epidemiologist, I really look at this through the lens of stress and health. I really use my Identity Vitality-Pathology Framework to really think about this as a symptom, right? All of this preventable suffering as a symptom of the illness that is caused by one fundamental thing, and that is how some human beings arrange our societies into hierarchies. And it's what Isabel Wilkerson in her book Caste captures so beautifully, so I'm not going to rehash it. And these human hierarchies cause some form of traumatic stress, whether it's physical, psychological, spiritual, for everyone. And moreover, these hierarchies determine who gets what resources to deal with that stress. And that's part of the reason why we see these very particular patterns of disease and health across groups that are located in very specific positions in these social hierarchies. So what am I actually suggesting that we should do differently than what we've been doing that is not working to get rid of these health problems? I think it starts with looking at our identities in a different way. And extensive research shows that how we identify ourselves is very much dependent on those positions in the social hierarchy. Now, for those of you who have been following my work, you know that according to my IVP framework, that the three aspects of identity that I think really matter most for our health are how connected we see ourselves to all other living beings, where we believe that living beings get their value, and who we believe deserves our compassion. Now, if you want to hear more about why I think these three dimensions of our identity are so particularly impactful and so much of the cool work that's coming out around this, check out the links in my bio. But for now, suffice it to say that I believe that these three dimensions of our identity, which I call an identity state, really shape how people respond to stress and also their willingness to engage in the practices that will dismantle social hierarchies. Now, identity state exists on a spectrum, right? And everybody's on the spectrum according to my framework. On one end of it is identity pathology, and on the other end is identity vitality. And this pathology side of the spectrum is really characterized by people who have been conditioned to believe that who they are is really just their physical traits, people who look like them. Those are my people. I don't identify with anybody who doesn't look or think like me. They believe that human beings' value is very much dependent upon their social status in society. And then they don't see much cause to extend compassion to pretty much anyone who doesn't look like them or isn't a part of their group. And even in many cases, don't see cause to extend compassion to even people who they think are like them. Now, these are the, maybe your Stephen Miller types, right? On the other end of the identity state spectrum, you have people who think of themselves first and foremost as a being in connection with other living beings. They understand that all living beings have an inherent value that is equitable, and it doesn't require doing anything. It's just by dint of being alive that a living being has value. And do everything they can to minimize the suffering of everyone. Now, in order to make this actually useful, To understand a bit of the problems that I was just talking about and all of the suffering and illness, I had to have a way of measuring this identity state, so I developed a questionnaire. And it's called the Identity Vitality-Pathology Scale. And there's a long version that has 20 questions and a shorter one with 12 questions. Both of them have been shown by an increasing amount of data to validly measure these 3 dimensions of identity state. What's really cool about having this questionnaire is that it means I get to actually test some of my ideas about how identity impacts health and the critical role that it may play if enough people were to shift their identities toward vitalized, right? What that would mean for addressing some of this preventable suffering that has been so hard to address despite many people being very committed to that cause. So stay tuned for more knowledge about how this scale can be used to better understand people's behaviors and their motivations for doing what they do, and maybe to help us see that everyone, even the most terrible person you might know, is actually after the same thing: to feel empowered, to feel valued, and to feel loved. And that so many of us have just been conditioned to go after those things in these really destructive ways. As always, I'm out here doing what I can, y'all, to help us all know better, do better, love better, and live healthier.